I ultimately left my slumlord with a vacant property, unpaid bills, and a nightmare tenant situation that cost him thousands. And it all started with a single, sparking electrical outlet. The place my wife and I were renting was a duplex, split right down the middle, here in upstate New York. Our little two-bedroom side was next to the garages and the driveway. It came with a tiny patch of yard, maybe 15 feet by 5 feet, which was just enough for our chocolate lab, Cooper, to use as his personal bathroom. The duplex itself was old, built in 1940 or maybe even earlier, nestled on an old farm road with a pumpkin farm across the street. The back of the house was built directly into the side of a hill that led up to a horse farm and a nice walking path. Our neighbor, who I'll call Walter, had the bigger side of the yard and, crucially, the only staircase that led up to that walking trail. Walter was an asshole 90% of the time, a man in his 60s who made it crystal clear that we were never to use his staircase to access the path. He was also subletting one of his rooms to a Russian woman his age named Svetlana, and the two of them were inseparable chainsmokers. They had a habit of smoking directly in front of our living room window, making our entire home smell like a bowling alley from the 1980s. We got into numerous fights with them over where they could smoke so our side of the house didn't constantly stink. The architect of our misery was the landlord, a 70-year-old man we'll call Frank. He lived down in Florida, using our duplex as his personal retirement cash cow, and it showed. As many people in upstate New York know, renting from an out-of-state slumlord can be a special kind of hell. These owners often live far away, trying to use the property as their sole source of income without ever wanting to invest a dime back into it. The first red flag appeared during our very first week. We were still unpacking, and my wife asked me to plug in the vacuum to clean up the styrofoam bits littered everywhere. As I pushed the plug into the wall socket, I saw a bright, angry spark. I tried it again. Another spark. I unplugged it. A third spark. I called Frank down in Florida and told him about the issue. His response was, "Okay, call around and get a price from an electrician and let me know what it'll cost." That was a red flag for me. I was paying him $1.300 a month, and now he wanted me to do his legwork because he was too far away to be bothered. Fine. I spent 20 minutes calling around, getting ballpark quotes from local electricians. I found one who would charge a $200 house call fee plus the cost of any outlets he replaced. I called Frank back with the news. "No," he said immediately, "that's too much. I'll send one of my guys over to do it." Frank's decision to save a couple $100 at that moment was classic short-sighted greed. He was completely unaware that this single act of penny pinching was the first loose thread that would eventually unravel his entire investment. It took a full month for his guy to finally show up. The electrician started swapping out the old outlets and discovered that nearly all of them were faulty. He ended up replacing 12 of the 14 outlets in our unit. He hadn't brought enough supplies to fix them all, assuming it was a small job. The two he didn't replace were in a room we never used, so I let it slide. 2 more months went by, and we rolled into a very rainy early spring. One night, a massive downpour hit, lasting for about 35 minutes. Suddenly, my wife yelled that she could hear water in the basement. I sprinted down the stairs and was met with an unbelievable sight. 2 waterfalls were gushing through the old basement windows that faced the backyard. There was already 4 inches of water on the floor, and it was rising fast. I called Frank the next morning to tell him his basement was now an indoor swimming pool. His response? "I need you to find a cleaning service to clean up the mess." I told him I couldn't. I was on my way to work. "Okay, do it after work then," he said. That was it. I told him, "Listen, I don't own this house. You do. You find someone today to clean this up and repair the windows, or I'm going to do it myself and deduct the cost from the rent, which is my right under New York state law." He got pissed and hung up on me. Later that evening, he called back, chastened, and said a cleaning service would be there in 2 days. "That's fine," I said, "but you might want to get those windows repaired. It's still raining pretty regularly." He said no, that wouldn't be necessary. He was busy getting quotes for a French drain for the back of the house. The cleaning crew showed up and spent 6 hours power washing and scrubbing the mud and water out of the basement. They left at 5 p.m., and for a brief moment, we felt relieved, but the windows, with their ancient, cracked seals, were still completely useless against the rain. Sure enough, 2 days later, another downpour hit, and the basement filled right back up with mud and water. I called Frank again. He just sounded defeated. He promised he'd send the cleaners back out on the same day that contractors would be there with a backhoe to finally dig the French drain. It took another 2 weeks for everyone to finally show up and get the work done. After living with a swamp in our basement for so long, we were happy just to have the space back, even though I was still furious about the whole ordeal. A couple more months of peace went by. Then, one night, my wife let out a scream from the kitchen. She swore she saw a mouse run from under the sink to under the oven. I asked her what it looked like. Big, gray, and it had pink ears, she said. My heart sank. I knew immediately that wasn't a field mouse. It was a full-grown rat. I pulled open the drawer below the oven, and my stomach turned. All of our cupcake pans were filled with little rat turds. It was disgusting. Thankfully, we never bake, so tossing them wasn't a huge loss. The sight of those droppings was not just gross, it was a genuine health hazard. As a PSA for anyone who encounters this, never, ever vacuum rat poop. When you vacuum or even sweep rat droppings, the particles break up, become airborne, and you breathe them in, risking disease transmission. You're supposed to wear a mask and gloves, use bleach and paper towels, and protect your eyes. It's a serious biohazard. I called Frank. Again. I told him we had rats in the kitchen. He said he had an exterminator friend nearby and would get back to me. He called the next morning with this gem. I spoke to my friend and he claims that your dog going to the bathroom in the backyard is probably attracting the rats. I was stunned. Rats don't eat dog crap. I told him, my voice tight. That makes no sense. We need an exterminator. This baseless accusation revealed Frank's fatal flaw, an unwillingness to accept any responsibility. By blaming us, he was actively choosing confrontation over resolution, a choice that would seal the fate of his rental income. Frank launched into a tirade, calling us the worst renters he's ever had, claiming we constantly complain about little things. I fired back. For $1,300 a month, I expect a rat-free, spark-free living space that doesn't flood or smell like a bowling alley. He muttered that he'd look into it and hung up. That was the final straw. I went online and did some research. I discovered that in New York, you can have the health department investigate a rat infestation. If they find the landlord is negligent, they can put a lien on the house until the problem is fixed. So, naturally, I went that route. I called the health inspector, who scheduled an inspection for a few days later. Just then, Frank called back. His tone had changed. He flatly stated that the rat problem was my fault because of my dog, and that I needed to deal with it myself. No problem, Frank, I said, my voice dripping with false cheerfulness. I just set up an appointment with the health inspector. The silence on the other end was golden. Then he completely lost it, cussing me out. I hung up and immediately called a lawyer, telling him to arrange for us to break the lease. I was done. 2 months later, the pieces all fell into place. The health inspector's report was damning. He found a massive rat colony, numerous holes in the foundation, and evidence suggesting the rats had been living in the house for years and years. He officially contacted Frank and informed him about the lien if he didn't address it immediately. Frank called me, suddenly compliant, saying an exterminator was on the way, but I had moved on. Instead of letting us out of our lease, Frank had insisted we sublet the place, so I put an ad on Craigslist. Soon enough, I found the perfect candidates, a group of rich, desperate college kids. When I showed them the apartment, I was very selective with my information. I told them there was no AC and that the next-door neighbor, Walter, was super chill and pot-friendly. I made sure to tell them he loved smoking and that they could totally use his private staircase to get to the hiking trails. One of the kids brought his mom, who pulled up in a brand-new Jaguar. The moment I saw that car, I knew my plan was perfect. Frank wouldn't be able to shit all over these people. Their parents would have lawyers on him in a second. I never once mentioned the rats, the flooding, the faulty wiring, or the fact that the place was a complete nightmare. I sealed his fate. Frank thought he was just getting new tenants. He had no idea he was inheriting a perfect storm of his own making. Frank accepted the new tenants, and with a few threatening letters from my lawyer, he even sent my full security deposit back. 3 months later, my curiosity got the better of me, and I drove by the old place. It was a beautiful disaster. It looked like the college kids and Walter were off to a very rough start. A cheap plastic divider had been erected down the center of the driveway, clearly marking territory. Beer cans were scattered all over the front yard, and Walter's truck was parked on the side lawn, something he never once did when we lived there. I could only imagine the parking wars that were driving him insane. Svetlana was nowhere to be seen. She probably jumped ship the moment the party started, but the best part came later. The cleaning service that had cleaned the basement called me. Frank had never paid their bill, and they couldn't reach him. With immense satisfaction, I gave them his personal cell phone number and his Florida address. I did one last drive-by 2 months after that. Our side of the duplex was empty. No furniture, no cars, no tenants. Everybody had left, which meant Frank wasn't making a single dime off his property, and that made me happy. Ultimately, the story is a stark reminder that being a landlord is more than just cashing a check. Neglecting your property and your tenants will inevitably lead to a situation where you're the one paying the price. Have you ever had to deal with a landlord who refused to make necessary repairs? And what creative solutions did you come up with?